Welcome to All Home Care Matters, the show where we discuss all things home care, with discussions on important age-related matters and topics. Brought to you by Enriched Life Home Care Services, the #1 rated home care provider in Michigan by Top Rated Local.
Hello, and welcome back to All Home Care Matters. If this is your first time visiting us here at the show, we want to say thank you for taking time out to be with us today. We appreciate how valuable everyone's time is, and that's why we try and make each episode here at All Home Care Matters something that will hopefully matter to you. Today, I am honored to welcome David Knack. He is the head of sales at Zingage. Welcome, David. How are you?
I'm doing really good. How about you?
Good. So I just said a fun name, Zingage. Why don't we start off with what Zingage is?
Yeah. So you're in home care. A lot of your listeners are familiar with some of the labor challenges within home care. There's a lot of challenges with turnover, with keeping good caregivers engaged and working enough and making sure that they're, making enough money and feel adequately recognized. And so we've created Zingage to be a engagement platform for caregivers to make sure that the best caregivers know how valuable the work that they do is, and that we have the opportunity to adequately recognize and reward great performance over time. One of the challenges is typically that we're only able to recognize the really big, shiny hero behavior within home care. But there's so much that happens behind the scenes that can go unnoticed, but that's really critical to making the business work. And so we set out to automatically recognize those kinds of things when they happen.
Okay. So now you're not originally, an old school home care person, right? So what attracted you to the home care industry and what brought you to it?
Yeah. So for most of my career, I've really enjoyed working with entrepreneurs. I think, some of my favorite experiences within my career working with folks in like the insurance and the real estate space and people who have a local business presence or investing in their community. And there's a lot of hats that you have to wear when you're doing that sort of thing. And so streamlining operations, using really intelligent automation to make jobs easier is a fun puzzle for me to try and solve. And so when I met the founders here and got to know their vision for, making home care something that's a lot easier to run, that works a lot better for clients, that works a lot better for caregivers, it really lined up with some of the stuff that I'd had the most fun doing in my career. And one of the things that I didn't expect about home care, but that has become really apparent to me, is this is a place not only with like really smart business owners who are building really amazing things in their community, but are also really good people and are really fun to hang out with. And so I've come to love home care because the people who make this industry what it is are just really good people.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Have you ever considered starting your own home care company?
Yeah, I joke about this. I think I'm enough in the honeymoon phase where I look at a home care agency and I'm like, that seems doable. It seems like it wouldn't be that hard. And I need to wait until my opinion of home care is only someone really dumb would start a home care agency, because it is such a logistical nightmare so many days. And then I think at that point is when it probably would be the right time for me to start one.
Well, I'm going to say I wouldn't use the word, and I know you're joking and I'm joking back.
Yeah.
I wouldn't use the word dumb. I would just say somebody that's very resilient would start a home care company. That's a better way of looking at it.
I think that's a better way of looking at it. I think you do just have to have such a intense focus on the mission and the reason that you got into home care in the first place, because that's kind of, that like long-term vision and ability to be resilient in the face of crazy obstacles is the only thing that keeps people going in an industry that can be so unpredictable and so turbulent.
No, and that's for sure. A lot of people, I say this all the time, it really is one of the toughest industries. When you have a loved one that's sick, you go to the hospital, the doctors are there, the nurses are there, the CNAs are there. When you have a loved one and you need home care and the family decides for whatever reason, let's have 24/7 care for mom. We need to start tomorrow. And if you're dealing with a legitimate, reputable company, they're going to say to you, this isn't takeout. You can't call upon delivery. Yep. Just like no more could I go to a surgeon tomorrow, meet them for the first time, and have surgery later that day or the next morning. It is a process. And a lot of people who aren't familiar with the industry, they don't understand that concept. We're here in our building. We don't have a room of, 15, 20 caregivers sitting around waiting for somebody to call. They're all out working and helping families. So it is a totally different animal, I think, than any other industry that I can think of. And I'm sure there's others, but I don't know of them. But I want to talk about some of these success stories that you like to highlight and share. What are some of the success stories you've seen from agencies using Zingage, and what's some of your favorite ones? You might have a lot, but do you have any favorites?
Yeah, I think kind of the headline that often grabs people's attention. We just did a look back. We're recording this at the end of January in 2025. So we just did a look back at our customer base for 2024, and we added a whole bunch of people. We grew a whole lot. And what we saw across the board for our new customers was a lot of success as it relates to reducing turnover. The industry average for turnover in 2023, this is the 2024 benchmarking report, said that on average, a home care agency experienced 79.2% turnover. That's a lot of turnover. And there's a lot of thoughts about why it's so bad. What can we do about it? And what we saw was that our owners, through the kind of secret sauce of engagement and gamification that we deploy across the board, dropped their turnover by 34%. And they did that while increasing the number of hours that each of their caregivers was working on average. And so seeing, less turnover and more productivity means that folks are working more, they're making more money, and they're happier in their roles. And so that was really exciting to see kind of on the whole. But some of the stuff that makes us really happy to see, first of all, is just seeing the feedback from the caregivers at the end of the day, who, most of the time, if you ask a caregiver, they're going to say something like, well, the only time we hear from our office is when we've made a mistake or when they need a favor from us. And one of the things that they really like about Zingage is that, we don't forget birthday. We don't forget work anniversaries. When people do little stuff like show up 5 or 10 times in a row, like we recognize that kind of stuff. And those are things that typically get overlooked. And so caregivers feel rewarded and recognized for their good work. That makes us feel really good. One of the things that happens when people feel good about the work that they do is their performance improves. And so we're seeing good habits get created by caregivers and make a big difference in how the business runs. So some examples of that, we were talking with somebody, and the last minute call out is super stressful for everybody. It impacts the client experience. It impacts, the office staff. It impacts the caregivers. Like a last minute call out, super stressful. And I was talking with this one customer, and they turned their camera to the side. And Lance, your team may have had a whiteboard like this at some point, but there was a whiteboard and it had lines on it. And they said that board used to be totally full of caregivers who had called out, and we had to kind of keep an eye on them and make sure that that wasn't becoming a trend. And like, it's totally empty now. We had another client that had an alarm that went off anytime there was a last minute call out. And, as you can imagine, that alarm was stressful, and they thought that the alarm broke. But in fact, through Zingage, they'd solved their call out problem. And so just seeing like the little changes in caregiver habits and performance over the whole employee group, and the kind of ripple effects that has in a positive way in the business. The reason that I love to do what I do is because running a local business can be extremely stressful, and making it feel more like you're having a good time and like you're connecting with people and with the reason that you started this thing in the first place, is really a good motivation to keep building what we're building.
Oh, that's wonderful. Just to kind of clarify with Zingage, I know you guys originally you were describing it as a way to recognize and, lift up the staff. But what does that mean? Because you referred to, helping to reduce call-offs, helping to increase morale.
Yeah.
maybe a little more detail about, the process of Zingage and, how you are helping home care companies.
Sure. Yeah. So a lot of this we'll get in the weeds for a second, but I think anybody who's listening who's been in the operations seat in a home care agency will know where we're coming from. So everybody's got a scheduling system. Maybe it's WellSky or Access Care or any number of the other ones that are on the market, and that's where your caregivers are assigned to shifts, and that's where their performance is tracked on key metrics like timeliness and attendance, and this thing called EVV compliance, which is like, did they clock in using geolocation in the approved way in the app? And that one's really hard to get caregivers to do because, it's a lot easier to call the office and say, hey, I'm at my shift. Can you clock me in? And that creates manual work, but it also creates a compliance issue. It's this whole thing. And so what we do is we're able to pay attention to the activity that's taking place inside of those scheduling softwares. Mm-hmm. And we're able to then track and automate rewards based on specific milestone completions on key metrics like attendance. Did you show up, 7 times in a row? You get 100 points or 200 points that then you can use to redeem for gift cards from Amazon and Starbucks and Walmart, Target, and a whole bunch of other places. And so there's kind of this, people come on the platform, it's no mystery because they know that they're going to get paid. But once they're there, the interesting thing that happens is it becomes much more of this kind of gamified experience where the money isn't the main thing anymore, but instead this kind of, how do I get to that next level? How do I get recognized, shouted out in front of my team? How do I kind of, pay attention to how I'm stacking up against other folks in the agency? And it creates this really healthy sense of competition. Whereas I think a lot of times, if you're a caregiver, the only stuff you hear about your coworkers is that they called out and you have to pick up their shift. And so seeing all the good activity, not just from yourself, but from others, makes you feel like, oh, okay, like other people who work here really care about the work that they do. And I'm not the only one who's working hard. And all of that kind of comes together to create this system where people are really excited about the work that they do and feel really good about it.
Oh, that's wonderful. Do you have a personal success story of yourself since being with Zingage? Because, going into the industry, like I was mentioning with families, not realizing how the process works and, things of that nature, how did you kind of prepare yourself and educate yourself in the industry? And then do you have a personal, like, little achievement or success that you've accomplished?
Yeah. So, it's a really good question. When I got into this industry in the first place, I was fortunate to come across some folks who had been in an operating role for a number of years and had either sold their business or kind of transitioned into a consulting role and were for free giving away hard-won industry insights about what it's like to run a home care agency. And so I reached out to some of those people and developed some relationships. These are folks like Lance, our mutual friend, Becky Reel, also people like Emily Isbell, Stephen Tweed, who you've had on the show. These are people who have forgotten more about home care than I'll ever know. And so they're super generous with their time and with the stuff that they've learned because they're really passionate about making this industry better. And so learning from them, and then I think also just getting a deep understanding of nobody's in this business just to make money. Like you can make a good living running a home care agency, but you could probably make more money for easier doing something else. And so everybody in this industry, almost without exception, has a personal story. I know we talked about your personal story when you were on my podcast, but everybody's got a story of why they care about this industry and why they started their business. I think in terms of like personal success stories for me, I think we grew a lot as an organization last year. We were fortunate to grow our customer base by about 10x. And that just, I think, goes to show that we're kind of the right idea at the right time. And we figured out how to solve some really significant challenges in this industry. And, my title is sales. And so I get to take a lot of credit for the success that we've had, but really just super proud of the team that we've built and how passionate everybody is in our organization, from people who are interacting with customers every single day to our engineers who in a typical company are just going to stare at a computer screen. But in our company, I think are really empathetic and really focused on what our customers are going through and how we can better deliver value to them. It's a really unique team and it's a really exciting company to be a part of.
Oh, that's wonderful, David. I want to talk about your approach to leadership and, how you're helping to foster that strong company culture, just like, we talked about when I was a guest on your show and you've kind of alluded to here, your staff are everything, especially in home care, but really in any business. What's your approach been to leadership and how are you helping to kind of foster that strong company culture at Zingage?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And something that I've been really mindful of as we continue to grow the team is that I've certainly got some characteristics latent in me that lend it to not building the best culture that we could. I've been bad at delegating in a lot of my career. I feel badly telling other people what to do. But I also am a perfectionist. And so just because somebody's going to do something the way that they see fit may not align with the way I think it should be done. And so those two things kind of compound, and it's just easier for me to stay possessive of my tasks and all those sorts of things. And so that's something that kind of awareness of the problem is, you're already a long way towards a solution to that problem. And so one of the things that we've done when we've been identifying good candidates and bringing people on board is really looking for, first and foremost, do they have an owner's mentality? Do they think about this company like they are responsible for the financial performance and, the kinds of interactions that we have with customers and the way that we're able to deliver value to them? And so I think, you can always hire for skills and abilities, but I think what's more important is to hire for character and work ethic and culture fit. Is this somebody who's going to align with the team's goal? We're too small of a team to be able to take, kind of passengers along. Everybody's got to really be contributing and take a lot of ownership for what they do. So I think hiring the right people, identifying the right folks, and we're not 100% of this. We certainly made some mistakes on that front and had to course correct. But when we get those right people in, really giving them a lot of autonomy, making it really clear what their area of responsibility is, and saying, hey, we brought you here because we trust you to make the right kinds of decisions. My founders use the terminology of we're a demanding but supportive environment. We've got really high expectations, but let us know what resources you need, and we're going to make sure that you've got what you need to deliver on your key objectives.
Oh, that's great. I want to talk a little bit about technology. That's a big thing right now. I mean, it's been in the news heavily the last couple of days, AI and, what that means for all our industries, for our country, but home care is also being mentioned as well. How do you see technology transforming the home care industry in the next several years?
I think it is a really, really exciting time to be in home care with some of these technological advancements that are going to come down the pike. So the big one that gets talked about a lot is AI. And home care providers should feel really good about the fact that their job is just about the last one that's going to get automated away by AI. You cannot simulate empathy in a convincing way. The kind of personal, intimate kind of service that home care agencies provide is not something that can be automated away. The opportunity for home care agencies is through really intelligent automation, through very specific applications of AI. So an example of that is this. We're working on right now, the last minute call out, we've talked about it a couple of times already, is this huge operational headache. Well, AI is really good at proactively identifying trends in your workforce and figuring out which caregivers are most likely to call out in a given week, and then figuring out who would be a good fill-in based on what we know about those caregivers. And so instead of offices having to scramble at the last minute calling a bunch of caregivers, I'll never forget, I was at a franchise event. There were a bunch of business owners there working on their business, finding new solutions, connecting with each other. It's supposed to be an opportunity to step away from the business and work on the business instead of in the business. And I remember hearing this one owner who was clearly had a call out happen and was responsible for filling that shift while she was in the middle of like the lunchtime exhibitor hall. Should have been a good opportunity to do all kinds of other things in the business. And she was immediately sucked back into the day to day. And so those kinds of very manual administrative tasks that kind of suck the life out of a lot of home care agency owners are something that in the very near future, there's going to be some really powerful applications of AI that are going to eliminate a whole bunch of that manual work and really give us the ability to get back to the real work of home care, which is to connect with our clients, connect with our stakeholders in the community, be it referral sources or whatever the case may be, and then to connect with our caregivers, who are the folks who are really delivering the value and embodying the mission of our organization. And so, so many agency owners that I talk to remember when they started out small and they knew on a first name basis every single one of their clients, every single one of their caregivers. And our goal with AI is to be able to scale that kind of culture so that the administrative headache is taken care of in large part by automation, and that they're able to get back to that feeling of knowing who their caregivers are and what's going on with them, as well as who their clients are and how all their, things are going as well.
Sure. I want to ask you a question. And, I think somebody should actually do a show on this. I think it would be fun, but if you know of anyone, let me know.
Sure.
So I want to ask you, what do you feel like is your biggest mistake?
Oh, yeah. Somebody should do a show about that. Yeah. Let's see. What is my biggest mistake? So this is in part unfortunate circumstances, and in part me being really naive and thinking things were simple. So I started a insurance agency and opened in June of 2020. So the market conditions were not exactly right. I don't know if you switched car insurance providers in the middle of 2020, but probably not, because like State Farm was doing like a 35% discount on premiums because nobody was driving, so nobody was getting in wrecks.
Right.
And so, but I think the other thing that I did not pay enough attention to, and this was the big mistake, is understanding how much top of funnel, how much lead gen activity, how much marketing, how much business development goes into what are really pretty manageable goals in terms of like, I need to write X number of new policies. And I think it was like, I don't know, 3 a week or something, which doesn't seem like that many. I knew a lot of people in my community and, it was not a big deal. But what I had underestimated was it's like the 10-3-1 rule, right? If you want 3 out the bottom, well, then you need to put, at least 30 conversations in the top of that funnel. And that probably means you need to reach out to about 300 people to get those 30 conversations in the top of the funnel. And so that business limped along for about a year before I ended up shutting it down. And I always tell people it was a great learning opportunity, which means it was expensive. And one of the things that I think I learned out of that experience was, look, running a local business, being an entrepreneur, if it was easy, everybody would be doing it, because folks who have put in the time and have made it, 3 to 5 years in the business are really successful and have a great income and have a lot of flexibility and have all the good stuff that goes with running a business. And I think my big mistake was seeing all the kind of good stuff on the back end and not having an adequate understanding of how difficult it is to put that in on the front end. So if I could go back in time, even though these sorts of things would be, I think in the short run, would feel like a pay cut, or, maybe like, oh, I could, I don't need to do this, I could run the thing. Being in that kind of context and spending some time in a local business to get a feel for what the owner has to do on a day-to-day basis, what the responsibilities are, what the kind of legal requirements are from a payroll tax standpoint and from a licensing standpoint, really kind of getting a deep understanding of the ins and outs of the business, the good days and the bad days, I think would have helped me to move in with such clear eyes and a better plan of what I needed to do to be successful.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I fully agree with you there. Before we go, David, I wanted to follow up just a couple more questions.
Sure.
What's one piece of advice you would give to somebody who is thinking about starting a home care company today?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I think I was talking to a friend of mine who has just started an agency out in Southern California. And this is probably not going to blow anybody's mind, but it's just such a simple way to think about the business and ensures that you don't have stuff slipping through the cracks. Yet in home care, because it's not an inventory business, you can't just have caregivers sitting on the shelf waiting to go to work. You have to give such equal and balanced attention to client acquisition and client retention, as well as caregiver acquisition and caregiver retention. And you can't pause either of those. I think it's tempting and people get on this seesaw, this roller coaster of, all right, I got to go sell, 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 sell. Oh no, I've got all these cases. I've got to staff. Oh, now I have too many caregivers. I've got to go sell, sell, sell. And the discipline and the focus in your business to be able to check in on each of those pillars and understand, how am I doing in each of these areas? It'll become really clear where the weakness is. And then I think that's kind of the second piece of advice is, as soon as possible, identify where you're strong and, more importantly, where your weaknesses are, and find a really great person to be your first employee in the business who can compensate for those weaknesses. I know some folks who are really operationally minded. They're really great on their, maybe from an HR background, they're really great on the caregiver acquisition, caregiver retention, scheduling, logistics side of things, but they're not super bubbly. They're not ready to be out in the community.
Yeah.
I know folks who are super marketing oriented, but their, kind of attention to detail, their operational kind of excellence leaves a little bit to be desired. And so the smartest owners I know who are new in this, their first hire is targeting the stuff that they're the worst at, which often is the stuff that they like the least.
Right. Yeah. And it's great advice. And, sometimes, right, David, the simplest, most common sense advice is the one that everybody misses. It's trying to reinvent the wheel when the wheel's right there. You just have to use it, right? So before we go, I like to ask guests this question often, and that's, we're going to keep in touch, and, you guys are a good friend of the show. And let's say, though, we don't contact each other or connect in the next 5 years, and I run into you somewhere. Where is David at 5 years from now? What's your goal? What's your plan?
Yeah, it's a really great question. I think for me, I've got we did a little bit of an edit because I have my daughter was making some demanding requests known. She's 8 months old now, so doing the months math, right? She'll be 68 months in 5 years. I think that's how parents keep track of their babies' ages. And so I think the most important thing to me is that I am getting better at all the time, and will have arrived, I don't know, but will have figured out and continued to maintain good work-life balance. Part of the value of my job, like there's certainly travel, there's times where it's really crazy and really busy. It's a startup, it's fast-paced, there's a lot of work. But part of the value and part of our culture that I think is really valuable is being able to have flexibility to hang out with my family. And so I think that's, as I think about like in 5 years, where do I want to be? Well, I want to be a really great dad. But also I think, our goal is to continue to grow really rapidly as an organization. And I think one of the best ways that I can prepare for that growth and where I hope to be in 5 years is a much better leader, a much better delegator, and somebody who people are really excited to work with and look to for leadership and guidance along the way. And I think, if I can kind of work out both of those things, that a lot of the other kinds of stuff of like, I'd like to make good money and, continue to pursue good financial goals. Maybe I'll have started a home care agency. Any of those kinds of things I think kind of take care of themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's great. And David, where would you like people to go to first find Zingage?
Yeah. So you can find us at Zingage.com. And then we're pretty active on LinkedIn. That's a great platform to keep in touch. You can check my LinkedIn profile out. I post a ton of clips from our podcast. Some are good, some are bad, but people seem to like the show. and we're able to get really great guests on. And so that's a good place to interact. But I'm available however you want to get a hold of me: email, phone call, LinkedIn, whatever the case may be.
What's the best email for you?
David@zingage.com.
And you also, like you mentioned, you have a show. You want to say the name of the show and where people can find that at?
Yeah, the podcast is Home Care Hindsight. We've got a YouTube page. We're on Spotify. We're on Apple Podcasts. And if you go, leave us a 5-star review. Makes a big difference to helping more people find the show. But it's growing all the time. I've got folks that are reaching out who are really excited to be guests on the podcast, and it's been really fun so far. Thanks for your appearance on it. People really enjoyed it.
My pleasure. It was a lot of fun. It's a fun show. Well, David Knack, thank you so much, and all the best to you and to everyone at Zingage. We'll look forward to continue working with you guys and supporting you however we can.
Yeah, that sounds great. Thanks so much, Lance.
Have a great day.
Yeah.
Thank you for joining us today here at All Home Care Matters. All Home Care Matters is here to help families as they navigate these long-term care issues. We invite you to visit us at allhomecarematters.com, where there's a private, secure, fillable form where you can give us feedback, show ideas, or if you have questions. Every form is read and responded to. And remember, you can listen to the show on any of your favorite podcast streaming platforms, or you can watch the show on our official YouTube channel. Just make sure that you hit that subscribe button so that you never miss an episode. We'd also like to say thank you again to David Knack from Zingage for joining us today. We look forward to seeing you again here at All Home Care Matters.
Thank you for joining us today. We look forward to you joining us again on another episode of All Home Care Matters. To learn more about the show and to connect with us, visit us at allhomecarematters.com.